Hello dear learners, welcome to this SWAYAM NPTEL online course on inclusive education. I am Dr. Umakant Prasad, an assistant professor from Department of Education, Vinay Bhavan Vishwabharati, Shantiniketan. This is week 2 and today we are going to discuss lecture number 9, that is development of special and inclusive education in pre-independent India. During this lecture, we will cover the development of special and inclusive education in ancient period, medieval period and the development of special and inclusive education by Christian missionaries and during the colonial spark. Inclusion is not a place, but it is a philosophy. It is about changing system, not children. India's journey in the field of special and inclusive education has evolved significantly over the decades, shaped by social reforms, major policy changes, global influence and a growing realization that education is not a privilege but a fundamental right for every child. India has come a long way in how it educates children with disabilities. In the past, these children were often hidden away, not given opportunities or sent to special institutions. Now, the country is moving towards inclusive education, which means all children, regardless of their abilities, have equal access to schooling, can participate fully and are treated with dignity. This historical overview explores the key milestones, pioneering institutions, legislative frameworks and shifting societal attitudes that shaped the landscape of special and inclusive education in India. It highlights how the country moved from charity-based model to right-based inclusion and blending tradition with transformation. This transformation reflects a deeper societal understanding of disability and a commitment to ensuring equitable educational opportunities for all children, including children with disabilities. To understand the progress of special and inclusive education in India, it is essential to examine its evolution across two key eras: the development of special and inclusive education in pre-independent era and the development of same in post-independent era. Here we are concentrating the development of special and inclusive education in pre-independent era. According to ancient Indian wisdom, everyone, regardless of ability, deserves the light of knowledge. Long before the modern world embraced inclusion as a philosophy, ancient India quietly practiced it in spirit and action. The foundation of special and inclusive education in India is not just a product of recent legislation or global influence, but it is deeply rooted in the Vedic traditions, philosophies of karma and compassion driven teachings of spiritual leaders. Texts like the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita and teachings of sages such as Ashtavakra and Valmiki reflect a belief in inherent potential of every individual regardless of physical or mental differences. The Vedic era, that is learning beyond limitations, in the sacred text of ancient India, disability was not seen as a limitation to knowledge or self-realization. A shining example is Ashtavakra, a revered sage born with severe orthopedic impairments. Despite his physical conditions, he became a master philosopher and authored the profound Ashtavakra Gita, a testament to the Vedic belief that the mind and soul beyond the physical body. It expresses with clarity and radical non-duality, the view that our true nature is pure consciousness, unaffected by bodily conditions, thought, emotions or actions. Ancient Gurukuls, that was residential schools led by enlightened rishis, welcomed peoples from all different backgrounds, rich or poor, able or disabled. Education was seen as a path to self-actualization, not a privilege reserved for physically fit or socially elite. This era was marked by inclusive practices based on the idea of karma, the idea that every soul, including those facing challenges, must be given opportunities to grow, evolve and prepare for a better life in the next cycle. From spiritual embrace to social exclusion, that was considered as gradual shift. However, the inclusive attitude of Vedic India began to fade with time. As a rigid caste hierarchies and superstitions took root, society gradually shifted from empathy to exclusion and stigmatization. During this period, disabilities were often misunderstood. Those with physical or mental impairments were exiled or hidden from society, used for amusement in royal courts and even feared as cursed being or believed to be possessed by evil spirits. Mental illness and intellectual disabilities were often treated with torture and witchcraft, particularly in rural and tribal areas. The belief that disability was a divine punishment or karmic debt became very common. This idea pushed people with disabilities even further to the sidelines of society, making them isolated and excluded. Despite this societal decline, spiritual reformers like Lord Buddha and Mahavira reignited the flame of compassion. Buddha's teachings emphasized the dignity of all lives, promoting kindness and care for the suffering and disabled. Mahavira Jain's philosophy rejected violence of any kind, advocating respect and support for everyone, even for the most vulnerable. Inspired by their teachings, rulers like Ashoka the Great and Harshvardhan focused on public welfare by establishing hospitals, shelters and rest houses, asylum for aged, sick and disabled and community support center for those in extreme poverty. This marked one of the earliest examples of state-sponsored social care for persons with disabilities, century ahead of modern welfare systems. Legacy and lessons from ancient India. As we discussed, India has been the deeply rooted legacy and lesson regarding inclusive education. Disability was once understood through a lens of spiritual potential, not deficiency. Early Indian society offered inclusion not by law but by value and virtue. There were times when education, empathy and equity worked hand in hand. By revisiting this rich and multi-layered history, we realize that India's journey towards inclusive education is not a new beginning but a fulfilling of an old promise, a promise of equal opportunity, compassion and dignity for all. Thus, inclusion is not a modern concept, but it is an ancient Indian virtue which we were rediscovering. But the inclusive education declined in the medieval period. Over the time, the spirit of inclusion declined and disabilities came to be widely misunderstood. Individuals with physical or mental impairments were often seen through the lens of superstitions as cursed, possessed or bearing signs of evil. As a result, many were excluded from society, hidden away or even displayed for amusement in royal courts. In rural and tribal areas, practiced such as witchcraft, torture and social exclusion were commonly used in misguided attempts to treat disabilities and mental illness. Islamic rule introduced zakat, mandatory almsgiving, which promoted care for poor and disabled. Maratha rulers like Shivaji and Ahilyabai Holkar continued this tradition of generous support, but still lacked educational provisions. Christian missionaries and colonial spark. The foundation for special education was laid by missionaries and charitable institutions, especially by Christian missionaries. In 1883, India's first formal school, that was the Bombay Institution for Deaf Mutes, now known as the Helen Keller Institute for the Deaf and Deaf Blind, for the deaf, was established in Bombay by Dr. Frederick William Muller and a German missionary. This institution marked a significant step in the history of special education in India, particularly for education of children with hearing impairments. In 1887, the first school for the blind, that is the North Indian School for the Blind in India, was established in Amritsar, Punjab by Annie Sharp, a Christian missionary from England. The school began as a missionary initiative with a small number of students and was among the earliest effort to provide systematic education and skills training for the blind in India. It served as a model for future schools for the blind across India, encouraging both government and private sectors to invest in inclusive education. The school contributed to challenging social stigma and demonstrated the visual impairment did not mean a lack of intellectual or creative potential. In 1941, the first residential institution in India for individuals with mental retardation, now appropriately referred as intellectual disabilities, was established in Bombay. This was the pivotal step in recognizing the needs of this population beyond custodial care and towards structured support. The Sargent report, officially titled During the Post-War Educational Development in India, was prepared in 1944 under the leadership of Sir John Sargent, the then educational advisor to the Government of India. It was one of the earliest comprehensive blueprints for educational reform in India, covering all sectors of education including special education. It recommended the establishment of special schools for children with various disabilities such as visual impairments, hearing impairments and intellectual disabilities. It proposed that these special schools should be government funded and that teachers should be especially trained to handle different kinds of persons with disabilities. However, at the time, the emphasis remained on segregated setting rather than on integration or inclusion. In conclusion, we can say in pre-independent India, the development of special education was primarily driven by Christian missionaries. Other non-governmental agencies and private efforts starting in late 19th century. The focus was on serving visually impaired students, hearing impaired students and intellectually disabled students, often through charity based institutions. Notably, the first school for deaf was established in 1883 and the first school for the blind in 1887, followed by similar initiative in other regions in India. Education for children with intellectual disabilities was almost non-exist, with the first dedicated home for such children opened only in 1941 in Bombay. Sargent report was considered a landmark document in the development of special education in pre-independent India that formally recognized the state's responsibility to educate children with disabilities, recommending the creation of special schools and trained teachers. Before India became independent, the way disabled people were treated was mostly separate and based on charity. There was not a clear overall plan or much public understanding of disability. Here are some references there. Thank you.